James Adams Perley was born in Enosburg, Vermont on May 27, 1835. As a young man, James Adams made the decision to move west and pursue his dreams in the gold-rich mountains of Colorado. The story was always told that he walked to Colorado from Vermont. He most likely spent a good deal of time walking, but we also know that he joined wagon trains and headed west and walked and rode along with them to his destinations. For a short time, he stopped in Des Moines, Iowa, and worked as a farm laborer. From there, he moved on to Emporia, Kansas, and worked with his cousin, Moses, to build a hardware business. In the early days of the western frontier, it was not unusual for travelers to run into the indigenous Indian populations along the way. A story that was passed down through the years was that James and Moses had to pass through the lands belonging to the Comanche and Kiowa Indians. The Perley men claimed to have been led safely through the Indian nations by the notorious outlaws Jesse and Frank James. Early in 1858, James Adams Perley made his way to Black Hawk, Colorado. Here, he invested in the Blackjack gold mine on Silver Gulch, and through the years, grub-staked other miners in the region. James met and married Charlotte Verdun in Black Hawk on April 10th, 1864. Together they raised 6 children: Warren Eugene, born 1866, Emma Josephine, born 1869, Eliza Gertrude, born 1871, Martha Ann, born 1873, Lydia Adelaide, born 1875, and James Henry, born 1879. My name is Karen Alonzi Van Gundy, and I am the great-granddaughter of Emma Josephine Perley Beale and the great-great-granddaughter of James Adams Perley. Although it was the gold that lured James Adams to the West, it was the beautiful property he purchased later in his life that became the Perley family legacy. To my family, the Bradford Perley property was always lovingly referred to as the ranch. James Adams purchased the ranch property in 1895 and relocated his family from Black Hawk to Morrison. His eldest son, Warren Eugene, stayed behind in Black Hawk to oversee the mining interests. The 4 daughters and his youngest son, James Henry, made their new home in Morrison. It always amused me a bit that James Adams returned to dairy farming in his later years, since that was the occupation he tried so hard to leave behind in Vermont. Nevertheless, there he was, raising cows and hauling milk once again. Emma's oldest son, Charles Beecham Beale, was my grandfather. I loved hearing the stories my grandfather told about the ranch. First, I must digress and tell you how it came that he got to spend so much time on the ranch. There was a scarlet fever epidemic that swept through Gilpin County in about 1906. My grandfather's younger brother contracted the disease, and it left him with rheumatic heart disease. The doctor in Black Hawk advised my great-grandparents that in an effort to save the young boy's life, they needed to relocate to a lower elevation. So the family packed up and moved to Golden. At last, my 8-year-old grandfather was within walking distance of Morrison. He would ride his horse and walk some of the distance to Morrison, where he would meet his grandfather, James Adams, making a milk delivery. The two would then make their way back to the ranch, and Papa, my grandfather, would spend the summer months working and staying out of trouble. When it was time for school to begin, Charles would return to Golden. Growing up, I knew where Golden was located, and I knew where Morrison was located. It always seemed to me that this was an awful long distance for a young boy to travel by himself. Papa always said, soon as he reached the Sody Lakes, he knew he was pert near there, and that Granddad would be waiting. Apparently, he always was. For years, I only got to see pictures of the ranch. I used to look at that majestic structure and could just imagine the opulence of such a place. Oh, the velvet curtains and plush carpets of Gone with the Wind filled my imagination. But no, Papa would set me to thinking straight. This was a hard-working ranch, nothing fancy. No running water, no electricity, no gas stove. Just a lot of hard work. But he loved it and taught me to love it as well. In one of the pictures over which I would linger, there is what appears to be a lovely pastoral scene of young women drifting in a small rowboat on a shallow lake that was located in front of the house. I asked Papa about the lake picture, and he laughed. He said he couldn't imagine why anyone was out there in that stinking pond in a boat. It was actually a settling pond that caught rainwater and some drainage from the surrounding creeks. It definitely was not a lovely, sweet, freshwater lake. But even such matter-of-fact explanations about what the ranch really was never changed my mind about what I could imagine it being. What a privilege it is for my generation to be able to visit the site today and once again imagine the grandeur of an earlier time. My great-grandmother Emma didn't spend nearly as much time living on the ranch as did her siblings. By the time James Adams and his family moved to Ken Carroll Ranch, Emma was engaged to William Beecham Beale, whom she had met in Black Hawk. They would marry in July of 1897. Emma graduated from Central City High School in June 1888. As a young woman, she pursued teaching. When the mining camps were being developed, there had been a real need for Chinese railroad labor. Once the rails were in, there was little need for the Chinese at all. There was a small Chinese settlement near the V where Highway 119 now splits off to Black Hawk or Idaho Springs. Emma had heard the Chinese were looking for a teacher. She applied for and got the job. She assumed that she would be teaching English and arithmetic to Chinese children. When she arrived, however, her class was made up of grown men and a few women. Undaunted, she taught English and arithmetic for 1 full year. Emma's teaching enabled these immigrants to pursue a better life in the Denver area. Emma died November 14, 1954, and is buried alongside her parents, husband, sons, and daughter-in-law in Golden Cemetery.